Hello, Vanakkam. It's a pretty interesting topic. First of all, let me congratulate VRS Sambat for conducting every year very successfully, connecting the international Tamil in one diaspora and calling it as Tamil Economic Conference. I don't think any other language economic conference is in India. So that way, it's a very meritorious one from our VRS Sampat. I think Tamil is always leading in many fora, including the classical. In the classical language, Tamil is always adjusted as the only language which has scored 11 out of 11. No other language in the world has achieved 11 out of 11. So this is yet another great contribution to the Tamil language. Well, this information technology and its opportunities are growing phenomenally. As the recent decades, it has come into a larger disruption. If you try to look at the 5 disruptions, these are the 5 disruptions that has changed the whole world. First one is the Kodak. You know, when I used to know Kodak in the early years of my travel to the US, Kodak is a company which can never die company. It is one of the 500 fortune companies. And this company has got assets and they have the, ability to stand any testing time. But Kodak started to fall in early 2000 is because of their disruptions in technology. They didn't adapt to digital technology. They have been always running behind the development of color photography, and they didn't adapt to it at all. That was the first disruption I have seen. Then the internet infrastructure. In the early days, I used to see people used to dig long trenches and they draw this optical fiber cables. I used to wonder, why do they do it? Why do they waste so much of money and disrupt traffic? What for it is all about? But then we understand this optical fiber, which is drawn around the world, has brought to the communication revolution, which is where your internet is born. So, second disruption. The third disruption is the business model. That is something which really attracts the whole world. They have created the Uber. You have cars, they around the world owned by different people, and your drivers, they work for their day-to-day running, and there is a system, there is a software product, there is a small interface which is an app which is being used by the consumers around the world, and they can access a car of their choice. And what happens, legacy travel companies started to find it difficult. They start running for Uber. So this is a disruption. That is where the whole world started to look at what is it is all about. It's all because of the information technology. It starts sweeping the whole world. Then the other disruption was artificial intelligence. See what happens. See, we all know intelligence is something, every human being has. But when you try to emulate this intelligence into a machine, then it becomes artificial intelligence. So how do you really emulate an intelligence into a artificial thing, namely an equipment, a robotics or a cobotics or whatever? How do you really make it intelligent and how it can work for you? That's where the disruption of artificial intelligence comes. But of course, there are a lot of things behind. You have the analytics, you have got a high amount of intelligent work on design and development, so on, but all put together into one box. We call it AI. So which is something that actually takes over the human's redundancy. When you given 5 different questions to a boy, same kind of man, it can be a mathematics, it can be a physics or whatever. First question he answers immediately. Second also he does. Third, he started to make a little trouble. And fourth, fifth, he'll start tiring if that is a difficult problem. But in the artificial intelligence, you give 5 problems or 500 problems or 5,000 problems, it starts throwing up. So that is where the power of artificial intelligence. So where is it going to be replaced? It is going to be replaced in all redundancy. So redundancy is going to be completely out of a thing. Henceforth, you're going to see a world where there is something that normally a system can do. We don't need a human being. For example, earlier, you order a cup of coffee, or you order a material, it's being delivered by the shop, or you walk into a shop and pick it up. Now you just do it on an electronic media, and that, see, Amazon is not packing. I mean, Amazon first it collects all the orders, and all the orders goes into a system, and the system decides, the AI system comes in and it decides whether that material is available. If it is not available, that material is sourced and it's packed, and it is moved through a robotic moving system. We call it micro robots, which will start moving and cluster it out to a packing end, and that gets packed and gets shipped. Everything is automated. So what happens is completely the human intervention, human interface is eliminated. That is what the IoT and artificial intelligence disruption. Now, looking at the adaptation, how adaptations are happening. Adaptations are happening pretty rapid. In all this sense, it was slow. If you look at the picture next, you see, at this picture, if you see, the adaptation of a power steering took about 3 decades to adapt. You look at all those legacy technology. For example, a diesel engine has taken about 40 years to stabilize. But what happens with the smartphone? It just got adapted in about 5 years' time. Mobile phones are getting adapted in about 10 years' time. So the adaptability is becoming rapid. So where is the threat? Threat is the adaptability. So the human beings are getting adapted to systems so fast and so rapid. So if you look at this adaptation, we call it adaptation rocket. So why do they call rocket? The way it zooms and gets set on the human use is so rapid and it's so fast that it becomes mandatory. See, today, if you travel around the world without having a mobile phone, it becomes complicated. You can't see, even in our airports, you don't carry your boarding pass. You just have your boarding pass on your mobile phone and just show it and start moving your checking in. And you can even print your own luggage tags. You don't have to really go into the airport. So what happens? Slowly, this field of packing and even the luggage, those things also will become slowly moved out of the system. Everything will be automated. I think the US, it is completely automated. You don't have to look at anybody except those legacy people. 1 or 2 people will be sitting. People go with that and just collect things and all that. But otherwise, it's all moves just like that. You just drop your luggage and you keep walking into your checking it. Things are becoming fast adaptation. So now, going back to this, I just want to talk about it. So with this adaptation, you also simultaneously see a great revolution which is following. The first revolution called industry revolution, which is what people have been talking about largely today. The first revolution was started with from a simple mechanical system. We started moving into a steam applied system. Then from that was the first revolution. Then we started moving to an electrical motors. Electrical motors was first installed in the Cincinnati slaughterhouse. And that becomes the first revolution which created with motor based. Then what happens? We started to adapt your computers and your robotics and your host of IoT, everything which came into existence, which is called the third revolution. After the third revolution, it moves out to the fourth revolution. That is where we are today. So you may ask a question. There is already a third revolution. You have the robotics. Why would you have, what is that extending into the fourth revolution? Fourth revolution, we call all along robotics. Now we call cobatics, which says collaborative robots. Collaborative robots, what happened earlier when you work with a robot's movement and your movement has to be mutually planned. Otherwise, you may tend to hit. Now the cobots are, we exist along with a human being, and it adjusts on itself. And it takes its own path. It doesn't need anybody to guide it through. It will just see that and it will go off accordingly. Then what is the second revolution? Second great thing, what I feel, the input of intelligence in everything. See, now whether we earlier forecast, actually we collect data from various points, and the data gets cleansed and the data gets further updated, and then we pool all the data, we do a correction methodology, and finally we come to weather forecasting. But today it becomes so generative and automated, in the sense the moment a data is absorbed, it's all absorbed through an IoT system. So the system absorbs the data and it plans, it runs its own routine, and it says, even the forecast is being published around the world without a human intervention. Earlier, it's all human driven, so it becomes automated. So now, if you see a Mercedes a manufacturing plant, I went recently, the entire plant, all they do is a couple of guys comes and marks the number of cars that they want to produce and the type of the cars they want to produce. Just key in those numbers and the type of cars they want to produce. Then it gets packed and moved out of the system. There is no human intervention. Every part is going through this. This is the industry 4th generation, which is going to come into the whole world. Now, nearly about 85% of the production in Germany is based on industry 4.0. America is moving towards 68%. China is moving towards 70%, but we are far behind. We are not adaptive. That is where we are now taking steps to get into this 4th generation. So this is another disruptive technology which is going to sweep the whole world. Now, if you look at the kind of disruption that is massively happening in various industries, you look at media, the disruption is 72%. See, I still remember when I first went to, I just went for a WHO plenarium at Geneva. It was in 98. I started to see ads everywhere, Lee Thames, everywhere there is a newspaper which is going to be released called Lee Thames. When Lee Thames was released in 1998, which was about 6 months earlier to Google and 6 years earlier to your Facebook. This newspaper came into Switzerland, which is a very famous newspaper, and it was headed by one of the top media baron and started to progress. It bloomed into a great newspaper, and their ad revenue was 32% in that point of time. Today, it is dwindled down to in single digits. They came into about 8% and 6%. It's fluctuating. Where is this ads have gone? It's all gone into the space of your Google, Facebook, and electronic media. Electronic media completely taken it. How is it this happened? The disruption happens how? This has happened just because the number of the users, namely the mobile phones, smartphones, and your iPads and so on, is started to growing up. And in a very recent survey says in the United States, about 10 hours, 30 minutes, every adult in the US is working on digital computing. So the whole media industry is able to understand where is the population, where is the buying population, which is all populating towards the iPads and mobile. So it's becoming more on internet revolution. So the disruption is start moving towards catching this market. So these media industries are slowly dropping down. See, you know the story. When television came, it didn't camouflage radio. Still radio was available. But every internet came, it did not stop television or radio. Still, it exists. But unfortunately, this recent online, particularly your internet revolution that starts in, it starts camouflaging other industries. It starts massively coming into other television and media industries, that these started to go down. So now the good news is the electronic book reading was phenomenally going up, but for the last 3 years, it starts to fall. People are again going back to print media. It's a good news. So people again going back to print media, because I am in the TNPL board, so I'm very happy. People started to buy papers more. So they started to buy print media. So print media is slowly coming back. See, it's coming back to a marginal level. So how do these industries live? This is a major question, which is what we have three most, suggestive, disruptive, innovation. Get clear about business URL. See, people must have a clear plan as to what kind of business URL, where exactly you can automate and change your business policies and the governance for your business so that it really gets better. Understand the disruptors advantage. See, mainly we don't go into the disruptors advantage. That's what the Western media is doing. Western media world is started to look at what kind of a mitigation that they are doing. There is a series of meetings that are going on, but in the rest of the world, it is a fight between two media companies. Two papers are fighting each other without realizing there is a third person came and steal their whole wealth. But I wanted a coordinated approach to really stand beyond, because still people have the habit of reading during the weekends. This is accepted all over the world. They don't go into the media. They don't go into the electronic media at all. They all want to read printed form during the weekends. So how really we have to serve? That is another strategy that media should really take it up. So there should be the ear should be always on the ground. We must start understanding the environment and try to go ahead. I will then talk about how media turn give a disruption to competitive advantage. See, really you got to move into a competitive advantage. So I would suggest media to adapt complete sales automation. They got to have a lot of sales automations to be done. In India, we don't do that at all. That is one reason the media is not being able to really survive the onslaught of the existing system. Second is a great advertisers relationship. But we still feel that electronic media is going to take you, but not that electronic media. Sometimes the paper carries a lot of value. Even the classified court documents and everything, which moves into the more than electronic media, it comes only into the paper. So they must reorient the sales strategy to survive. Then the advertiser and the agencies and their network and the relationship should be really firmed up, and there's a lot of automations to be done and huge analytics to be done on each of these platforms to have a sustainable growth. Then campaign management should be done. Actually, we don't have, even when we talk about print media, they also must have an electronic campaigning system. Print media should not always depend on print alone. And the television, any television, all media companies should not always go into their own line, and they have to have a disruptive change in them. So with that, and of course, the revenue recognition is another important point. So with that, I would like to, I think he has shown his time. So all the best. I think media and all in serious call on disruption, we have to really make over. Thank you.